There was a box in my freezer. It wasn't there the day before. It was wedged behind a bag of curly fries and a bottle of expired vodka I'd been meaning to throw out since April. Plain white cardboard. No markings. No tape. Just sitting there like it belonged. I live alone. I've lived alone for the past 3 years. So let's make that clear before I go any further. I didn't put that box there. And yet, there it was. Now, any normal person would call the cops. Or at least throw it away. But if you've ever lived long enough with the guilt of walking out on someone you once promised forever to, you know how your brain starts to twist logic into spaghetti. Part of me thought maybe I was losing it. Another part, the really damaged part, thought maybe she left it. Her. And by her, I mean Callan. Not Callie. Not Kayla. Callan. Weird name, I know. But she hated normal things. Including me, eventually. I hadn't heard from her since the night I left without a word. I'd caught her in a lie so bold it made my lungs forget how to breathe. But I didn't yell. I didn't confront. I just ghosted her in real life. Took my car, my keys, my toothbrush, and disappeared like a coward in the fog. Back to the box. I took it out, set it on the counter. It was cold. Heavier than I expected. I opened it. Inside, a burner phone, fully charged. A single unlabeled key. And a note, typed, on plain printer paper. Not everything was a lie. You need to go to 17 Monroe Street. Tonight. Midnight. Come alone. You owe me that much. There was no name, but I knew who it was from. My chest started doing that thing again. The stuttered thumping, like it wanted to restart itself the wrong way. I hadn't heard from Callan in years. Thought she hated me. Thought I hated her. I should have ignored it. I should have laughed. I should have burned the damn note and gone back to my sad little life full of reheated pizza and therapy podcasts. But here's the part one hate admitting out loud. I missed her. Even the worst parts of her. I checked the street. 17 Monroe. It was here, in my town. How? Why? And then I saw the kicker. The phone lit up. One new message. No number. It just said, "Don't be late. They're watching the house." And that's when I realized the camera on my porch, the one I'd installed after the raccoon break-in last winter, was blinking red. It only blinked red when someone was actively watching the live feed. I hadn't opened the app in weeks. I unplugged it. Too late. I saw a figure across the street, standing by the mailbox. Not moving. Put up. I dropped the phone. Midnight was 6 hours away. But I already knew. Nothing about this was random. And whatever was waiting for me at 17 Monroe Street had everything to do with why I left her in the first place. I drove the entire loop around my town twice before I accepted it. There is no Monroe Street. I typed it into Google Maps, Waze, even asked that smug AI assistant on my phone that usually gets everything wrong. All of them returned the same thing. No such address. I knew my town. I'd lived here long enough. Walked every alley. Delivered pizza here in college. There was number 17 Monroe. There wasn't even a Monroe. But the note didn't lie. Because at exactly 11:43 p.m., as I stood outside in the chill of early spring with the burner phone in my pocket and a jacket I hadn't worn in 2 years, I watched the street sign I swore didn't exist flicker to life. A metal pole just beyond the industrial lot, half swallowed by trees and shadow. Monroe St. I nearly dropped the flashlight. It was real. Not on any map. Not on any grid. But standing right in front of me. My breath clouded in front of me. I stepped forward, slowly, as if the pavement might collapse under me. The road was narrow, only wide enough for one car. No lights. No sidewalks. Just rows of old houses, the kind that looked like no one had touched them since the 70s. Porches sagging. Windows boarded. One had a rocking chair gently moving in the breeze, even though there was no wind. I walked. I counted addresses. Number 13. Number 15. And then 17. A one-story bungalow with chipped blue paint and a screen door hanging on one hinge. But every single light inside was on. Bright. Blinding. And yet, somehow, the place felt dead. Like the light was trying too hard to pretend someone lived there. My hand was shaking as I pulled out the key from the freezer box. It fit the lock perfectly, like it had been waiting its whole life for that moment. I pushed the door open. The air inside was warm. Too warm. Almost humid. And the first thing I saw, the thing that made my knees lock up, was a framed photo of me and Callan on the mantel. One I didn't know existed. From behind us, a woman's voice said, "Took you long enough." I turned so fast I nearly fell. There she was. Callan. Alive. Here. Same crooked jawline. Same scar near her temple. Hair shorter now, messier. Like she'd cut it herself in a hurry. But it was her. And in her arms, a stack of documents. A folder with my name written in red marker across the front. She tossed it onto the table without looking at me and said, "Before you ask anything, you need to read every word of this. And don't interrupt me when I tell you what happened after you left. Because, Travis," she finally met my eyes, "they think you're dead. And if we don't leave this house in exactly 11 minutes, they'll make sure of it." I didn't move. I didn't speak. My brain was desperately trying to connect dots that didn't exist yet. The folder sat in front of me like a bomb. She sat down across from me and said something I'll never forget. "You thought you walked away from me, Travis. But you didn't walk away. You walked straight into something. You just didn't know it yet." Then she hit the lights. And from the kitchen window, I saw a black SUV roll to a stop without headlights. We didn't have 11 minutes. That was the first lie she told that night. The black SUV didn't wait. As soon as the lights in the house went off, I watched two doors swing open and two figures step out. One tall, one not so much, both moving like they'd done this before. Calm, fluid, purposeful. Callan had already dropped to the floor and pulled me down with her, mouthing something I couldn't hear over the sound of my own pulse crashing in my ears. She yanked the folder off the table and shoved it into her backpack like it was gold. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, shake her, and ask why the hell any of this was happening. But I couldn't get my throat to work. I was frozen in the moment, held hostage by fear and the kind of regret that coils around your spine and squeezes. She motioned toward the back door, but I just sat there, crouched under the window like some useless, shivering statue. "Travis," she hissed, her voice a shade of herself I'd never heard before. All grit, no softness. "Move." So I did. We slipped out the back as quietly as we could. She moved like she knew this place, like she'd rehearsed it. I tried to keep up, tripping over a pile of leaves and knocking over a rusted watering can that sounded, in that moment, louder than gunfire. A flashlight beam swept across the yard behind us. I ducked. Callan didn't. She grabbed a rock from the ground, and I swear on my father's grave, she threw it with sniper precision into the far bushes. It clattered, loudly, and the beam shifted. Just like that, she yanked my arm, and we bolted down a side alley that shouldn't have existed. When we finally stopped, my chest was on fire. Not from running, but from the panic attack I'd been trying to swallow since I opened that damn freezer box. I collapsed behind a row of dumpsters, gagging on the smell and gasping like a fish pulled from water. She crouched in front of me and said something I never expected. "I didn't cheat on you." I blinked, completely caught off guard. "What?" "I know that's why you left," she said, wiping her forehead with her sleeve. "You thought I cheated. That's why you walked out without a word, right?" I stared at her. I hadn't said anything about that. Not once. Not since she knocked on my door. I stammered. "I heard a guy in the house. Laughing. The back door opened." "That wasn't what you thought," she said, voice low. "It wasn't even my choice." And just like that, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. The night I left, the man's voice, I never actually saw anyone. Never saw her with someone. I just assumed. And I ran. Like I always do. "What the hell is going on, Callan?" I finally choked out. "What is this? Why were you in my house? Who are those guys?" She looked me straight in the eyes. "Do you remember our honeymoon? The motel in Oswego?" I nodded slowly. It was the only place we could afford at the time. A dingy roadside dump with a flickering ice machine and a vending machine full of expired snacks. "There was something in the nightstand," she said. "You took it. You thought it was a flash drive someone left behind. You joked that it probably had tax returns or porn on it." My heart dropped into my stomach. "I kept it," I whispered. "I forgot about it." She nodded. "You shouldn't have. What was on it?" She took a deep breath. "Files. Records. Not government. Not military. Worse. You triggered something just by plugging it into your laptop. And the people it belonged to, they don't care that it was an accident. They don't care that you disappeared. They didn't stop looking for you. And when you finally showed up on the grid again, renewing your driver's license last year, that was enough. They know you're alive. And now they know I'm with you." I wanted to vomit. "So what do we do?" I asked. "What do they want?" "They want the drive," she said, standing up and tightening her backpack. "And we're going to give it to them." "I don't have it," I said, panicked. "It's gone." I threw it out years ago. She turned to me, eyes darker than I remembered. No, Travis, you didn't. And before I could argue, she added, because I found it last week in your basement. When she said she found it in my basement, I thought she was lying. I hadn't been down there in over a year, not since the pipes froze that one winter, and I decided to just pretend the entire space didn't exist. It smelled like dust, mold, and whatever bad decisions I'd stored down there with my old furniture. But Callan's eyes didn't waver. She meant it. We sat in silence for a minute, our backs pressed to the cold concrete behind those dumpsters. The street beyond was quiet now, too quiet. The SUV had vanished, and the only sound was the low hum of a distant train. I couldn't tell if we were safe or if this was just the calm part of the nightmare before it started all over again. Travis, she said finally, brushing a strand of hair from her face. When you left, you didn't really disappear. You just thought you did. They've been watching you. Maybe not constantly, maybe not right in your face, but enough to know where you've been, who you talked to, where you moved. They didn't want you dead. Not yet. They wanted to make sure you still had what belonged to them. I stared at her, my brain stumbling over the words. You're saying I've been tracked for 5 years without knowing it? That's not possible. She gave a small, humorless laugh. Travis, you still use the same phone you had when we were married. You still order pizza from the same app. You use your debit card at the same gas station every Thursday morning on your way to work. You're predictable. You've always been predictable. That's what made it so easy to find you. I didn't know whether to feel insulted or terrified. Probably both. What's on the drive? I asked, finally cutting through the tension. You keep saying it's dangerous, but dangerous how? Are we talking government secrets, cartel stuff? What? Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. It's not something you'd understand right away. It's a list, Travis. Not of names, of coordinates. Places. Hidden sites. But not just storage or property. The files point to locations where things have been buried. People, maybe. Evidence. It's messy, it's encrypted, and whoever owns it doesn't want it seen. I've been trying to decode it for years, and the more I saw, the less I wanted to know. I rubbed my face with both hands, the adrenaline starting to wear off, leaving only nausea behind. So why come to me? Why not burn it, or give it back, or whatever? Because, she said, locking eyes with me, it's tied to your name. Your email. Your old laptop. You opened it first. You didn't realize what it was, but when you plugged it in, your metadata got embedded in the files. You're the only person they can trace it to. So if they find me with it, they'll assume I got it from you. If they find you, they'll assume you never stopped using it. Either way, we're both targets now. Her words hit like a migraine. I could feel the blood draining from my face. And you're just telling me this now? After all this time? She looked away, her expression collapsing for a brief second before she said, I didn't think you'd believe me. I thought you'd run again. You always run. That one cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Because she was right. Running was what I did best. It's what I'd done that night years ago when I thought she'd betrayed me. It's what I'd done every time life demanded courage I didn't have. Let's go, she said, standing up and brushing off her jeans. We have to get back to your house before they do. My house? I asked, completely thrown off. You think they'd go there? She glanced at me with a half-smile that wasn't a smile at all. Travis, they're probably already there. We walked fast, keeping to the shadows, moving like ghosts between alleys and side streets until the outline of my neighborhood came into view. The closer we got, the more wrong everything felt. My street was too quiet. No dogs barking, no porch lights on. The air itself felt suspended. When my house finally came into sight, I stopped dead in my tracks. The front door was open, just slightly, but enough to make my stomach twist. Callan didn't hesitate. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back entrance, whispering, Don't make a sound. We slipped through the side yard, my heart slamming so hard I thought the noise alone would give us away. The back door creaked as she pushed it open, and we stepped inside to a house that didn't look like mine anymore. Every drawer in the kitchen had been pulled out. The couch cushions were ripped open. The walls had new holes, fist-sized, brutal, impatient. Someone had been searching, and not carefully. Callan's voice was barely audible. They were looking for the drive. I turned to her, my breath catching. You said you found it here. You said you already had it. She nodded, and her face changed. Something in her eyes, some flicker of regret I couldn't read. I did, she said slowly. But what I didn't tell you is that I didn't take it. What? I left it, she whispered. Because I wanted to see if you'd notice. If you'd still remember what you ran from. If you were still the same man who could ignore the truth sitting right beneath him. And before I could say another word, the floorboards above us creaked. Someone else was in the house. She grabbed my wrist and mouthed a single word that froze the blood in my veins. Hide. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, like someone testing each floorboard to see which one creaked the loudest. It wasn't the sound of a burglar rushing through drawers or breaking glass. It was measured, confident. Whoever was upstairs wasn't searching. They were waiting. Callan's hand was still gripping my wrist so tightly I could feel her pulse racing through her skin. She motioned toward the basement door, but I shook my head. The basement was a dead end, no windows, no back exit, and if we got trapped down there, it would be over. She gave me a sharp look that said, "You're the same idiot you've always been," and then pointed toward the hallway instead. The stairs were to the right, the back door to the left. We didn't get to choose. A voice called from above. "Travis." My blood turned to ice. The way they said my name, it wasn't a shout. It wasn't even angry. It was casual, calm, like a teacher calling a student who'd fallen asleep in class. "Travis, you need to stop making this difficult." I wanted to answer, ask who it was, how they knew my name, what they wanted, but Callan grabbed my face with both hands and forced my attention back to her. Her eyes were wide and furious. "Don't talk," she mouthed. Then, barely breathing, she whispered, "You don't know his voice, do you?" I shook my head. She leaned closer. "I do." And in that moment, I saw something shift in her expression, something that looked like shame. We moved quietly down the hallway, each step careful, slow, deliberate. The house was a maze of overturned furniture and broken picture frames, the air thick with dust and the sour smell of fear. Callan motioned toward the living room closet. It was small and shallow, the kind of place you'd hide from a tornado, not a person. But it was all we had. We slipped inside, closing the door until only a sliver of light showed through the crack. My heart was trying to punch its way out of my chest. I could hear every breath I took, every creak of the floor outside. Then, footsteps, 2 sets this time. One heavy, one lighter. They were coming down the stairs. "Travis," the voice said again, closer now, still steady, almost kind. "You made this harder than it had to be. We didn't want to involve her. But she's persistent, your wife." Callan flinched at the word wife. I didn't know if it was anger or regret. Probably both. The second voice spoke then, softer, female, with a clipped, professional tone. "He's here." Motion picked him up. Basement camera caught both. Basement camera. My stomach twisted. They'd been here before. They'd planted cameras in my house. Probably when I was at work, maybe even long before that. Every time I thought I'd left the past behind, it was already waiting for me at home. Callan's fingers brushed against mine, trembling. I looked at her, silently asking, "Who are they?" She mouthed 2 words I could barely make out. "Not police." The footsteps stopped right outside the closet. I could see the faint outline of boots through the crack in the door. Whoever it was stood there for a long time. So long I started to count in my head just to stay sane. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then a hand reached for the doorknob. Callan reacted before I could. She pushed me backward, forcing me against the back wall as the door burst open. A blinding light filled the closet. "Found you," the man said. I didn't see his face clearly, just the silhouette. Tall, broad shoulders, dark jacket. He reached for me, but Callan was faster. She threw something, small, metallic, and it hit the floor between us. For half a second, I thought it was a coin. Then it hissed. Smoke exploded in every direction. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Callan yanked me out by the collar, dragging me through the haze toward the kitchen window. I could hear shouting, coughing, boots slamming against the floor, but I didn't dare look back. We crashed through the window, glass exploding around us, and landed hard in the grass outside. I rolled over, gasping, my arm bleeding from the shards. Callan was already on her feet, pulling me toward the neighbor's fence. "Move," she shouted. I climbed after her, clumsy and half-blind, my lungs burning. Behind us, someone fired. Once, maybe twice. The sound echoed off the houses, sharp and terrifyingly close. We hit the alley and kept running. My vision blurred, the world spinning. Somewhere in the distance, I could still hear them yelling. I didn't know how far we ran, but by the time we stopped, we were behind the abandoned diner near the edge of town. My knees gave out. I collapsed against the brick wall, chest heaving, trying to piece together what just happened. Callan crouched beside me, wiping sweat from her face. They weren't supposed to find us that fast, she said quietly. Someone tipped them off. I wanted to scream at her, demand she explain, but she was already pulling something out of her pocket, the drive. Small, black, scratched, unassuming. The thing that had apparently ruined both our lives. Here, she said, placing it in my shaking hand. You need to see it for yourself. I turned it over, barely able to focus. Why now? Because, she said, meeting my eyes. You need to know what you opened 5 years ago. You didn't just find their data, Travis. You found their project. And one of the names on this drive is yours. The flash drive looked completely ordinary. Black plastic, scratched, something you'd find at the bottom of a desk drawer. I turned it in my hand, trying to see what kind of monster could fit inside something so small. The label had been peeled off, leaving a thin film of glue. It was light, almost too light, as if whatever data was inside weighed nothing at all, but it sat in my palm like guilt itself. Callan sat across from me, leaning against the diner's back door, breathing hard. She hadn't spoken in a while. Her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat, and her hands were shaking, though she was trying hard to hide it. I finally broke the silence. You said my name's on this thing. What does that even mean? She stared at me for a long moment, then said, You remember the company I used to work for before we got married? The consulting firm? Yeah, the one that always paid you to fly to places you couldn't talk about. She nodded. That wasn't exactly a consulting firm. It was a cover for a data broker, one that specialized in information laundering. Not money laundering, data. They'd collect private info, corporate intel, blackmail material, you name it, and clean it. They'd sell it to whoever paid the most, with every trail erased. The drive was a full backup of their client ledger. Coordinates for drop sites, payment routes, storage caches, everything they'd ever done. My stomach tightened. And you're saying I was on that list? Why? Because they used your name to cover one of their transactions, she said quietly. Back when we were together, they needed a clean ID, someone with no criminal history, someone boring. You were perfect. They built a fake shell company using your name, filed invoices through your tax records. It was all invisible because it looked legitimate, just a guy with a small business. When you opened the drive that night, it flagged your digital fingerprint and bound the files to your credentials. After that, you weren't just an innocent bystander. You were part of their system. I couldn't breathe. My mind was spinning through the years I'd spent thinking I was free. My new life, my new job, my new name. It was all just a thin disguise stretched over a mess I didn't even know I'd left behind. So all this time, they thought I was hiding something that belonged to them, I said. That's why they never stopped. Callan nodded. They think you're holding the ledger hostage. And they think I helped you steal it. We both sat there for a minute, listening to the wind rattle a loose piece of tin on the roof. The night was too quiet, the air too heavy. I looked at the drive again and asked the question I shouldn't have. What's actually on it, Callan? I mean the real reason they care. Her eyes flicked up to mine. Do you really want to see? I hesitated, then nodded. She pulled a small laptop from her backpack, old, beat up, covered in stickers. She powered it on, but before plugging the drive in, she pulled a thin wire from her pocket and attached it to the side. Faraday adapter, she said when she caught me staring. Keeps it from broadcasting. When the files loaded, the screen filled with rows of numbers, coordinates, transaction IDs, encrypted notes. Thousands of entries, scrolling faster than I could read. Then, suddenly, a name popped up among the chaos. Travis L. Denton. My name. My old name. I felt the blood drain from my face. She clicked it open. Inside were records I'd never seen. Emails, signed documents, wire transfers under my name totaling millions. Fake accounts tied to my social security number. I wanted to deny it, to say it wasn't possible, but there it was. Evidence of crimes I didn't commit. They framed you, Callan said softly. And when you left, they thought you'd taken their evidence with you. You became the loose and they couldn't afford. I sat back, staring at the screen. So what now? We can't take this to the police. They'd arrest me before they even looked at it. She nodded grimly. Exactly. That's why we need to find someone who can decrypt the full list. Someone who can prove what this really is before they find us again. Before I could respond, the sound of a car engine cut through the silence. A black sedan rolled slowly down the service road behind the diner. Its headlights were off. Callan closed the laptop and shoved it into her bag. We have to move. We sprinted through the back alley, the gravel crunching under our feet. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but the fear kept me moving. We ducked behind a rusted dumpster as the sedan's engine stopped. 2 doors opened, then closed. I could hear footsteps on the pavement. One of them spoke into a radio, the voice calm, methodical, practiced. They were here. Fresh prints. Split and sweep east. Callan leaned close, her whisper barely audible. They're not just tracking the drive anymore. They've got facial recognition hooked to every traffic cam. If we stay in town, they'll box us in by morning. I turned to her, whispering, "Where do we go?" She didn't hesitate. "North. There's a cabin near the lake. My old contact used it years ago. It's off-grid. If we can get there, we can make a copy of the files and contact someone who still owes me a favor." "Who?" I asked. She looked at me then, and for the first time since she'd shown up, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not the kind that comes from being hunted, but the kind that comes from knowing too much. "Someone who used to work for them," she said quietly. "Someone they tried to erase." The car door slammed again. Footsteps grew louder. Callan grabbed my hand, and we ran. Behind us, a voice shouted. Another shot cracked through the night, whistling past my ear. We didn't look back. As we reached the end of the alley, the lake wind hit us like a slap. Cold, sharp, clean. For a brief second, I could smell pine and water instead of fear. And then, just as we disappeared into the tree line, the burner phone in my pocket vibrated. I pulled it out. A new message glowed on the screen. "You can't run from yourself, Travis. You never did." The cabin by the lake wasn't marked on any map. We drove for hours in near silence. The burner phone powered off and wrapped in aluminum foil. The laptop zipped in a thermal bag that Callan swore was non-bleeding. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't ask where she got it. I didn't want to know. At some point, asking questions started to feel like lighting matches in a gas station. She drove like someone who'd memorized the roads blindfolded. I barely recognized anything by the time we hit the dirt path that curved between 2 thick rows of pine. The sky had shifted to a grim, violet gray, the kind of color that comes just before the sun rises and everything breaks loose. The lake came into view through the trees, flat, black, unmoving. Not even the wind dared disturb it. The cabin sat crooked on a slope, made of timber that had warped under decades of rain and regret. One window was boarded. The chimney leaned like it had lost the will to stand upright. It looked like a place where bad decisions got buried, but Callan said it had once been a safe house. That didn't make me feel any better. Inside, the air was stale and sharp, like someone had sprayed bleach and then walked away for a year. There was a fireplace, a broken couch, an old desk with a dent in it the size of someone's head. She locked the door behind us, drew every curtain, then pushed a heavy dresser in front of the window. That's when I realized she wasn't just running from something. She was preparing to outlast it. Callan booted up the laptop while I stood in the corner, still clutching the flash drive like it might whisper answers if I held it tight enough. I kept thinking about the message on the burner. "You can't run from yourself, Travis." It haunted me, not because it was creepy, but because it was right. I hadn't changed. I had run. I had spent 5 years trying to become someone new, someone clean. But deep down, I was still the man who had left his wife without a goodbye because he was too scared to ask the right question. She gestured me over. "It's time you see all of it." I sat beside her. The files loaded slower this time. Maybe the cold, maybe the signal jamming trees, maybe fate trying to stall. But eventually, the directory appeared, and she clicked into a folder marked only with a string of numbers. Number 42067ATDN. Inside were video files. Dozens. All time-stamped. All labeled with names. Most meant nothing to me. Until one did. Dent Travis __ confirm. MOV. I stared at it. What the hell is this? Callan didn't answer. She just pressed play. The screen filled with a surveillance room. Gray walls. A long table. 3 people seated. A man in a gray suit was at the center, back to the camera. Another sat across from him, a younger version of me. I blinked. Hard. That's not me. Callan didn't respond. On screen, the man pretending to be me was calm, almost bored. He slid a folder across the table. As you can see, the records are clean. The transfers will clear in stages. If anyone tracks it, it'll lead back to a dummy consultancy with no employees and a non-functional phone line. The agent nodded. And the witness? Gone, the fake me said. Just like you asked. The video ended. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. What the hell did I just watch? Callan turned to me, her voice low. They didn't just use your name, Travis. They used your face. Your biometric data. I don't know if it was deep fake, surgical, or something else, but they created a version of you who could sign off on things. Someone who could sit in front of clients and launder transactions. Someone who was disposable if things went bad. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think. I just stared at the paused video frame. The grainy image of a man who wore my life like a mask. That's who they killed, she said softly. 3 years ago. The car crash outside Albany? The one where the driver burned alive and was ID'd as you? That was him. They wanted to erase the trail. Start over. But when you renewed your ID last year, you reappeared on their radar. They thought you faked your own death. That you were trying to blackmail them. I backed away from the screen. I couldn't breathe. So I'm a ghost to them. A loose end. A threat. Callan nodded. And as long as that drive exists, they'll never stop coming. I sat on the floor, head in my hands, trying to hold onto the shreds of reality. Every memory felt corrupted. Every truth had splintered. My name. My identity. My past. None of it belonged to me anymore. Then I heard something. A click. Not from the laptop. Not from the cabin. From outside. Callan froze. We both turned toward the window just as a shadow passed across the curtain. They found us, she whispered. No, I said. They were already here. Then the front door handle turned. Once. Twice. Slowly. Testing. Callan drew something from her bag. A small black pistol I didn't know she had. She clicked off the safety without a word. There was a pause. Silence. And then, a voice from the other side of the door. Not the calm voice from the house. Not the radio woman. This one was familiar. Unsettlingly so. Travis, it said. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to tell you who you really are. I looked at Callan. Her face had gone white. You recognize it? I asked. She nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. It's the man who trained to fake you. The man outside the door didn't knock. He waited. The kind of waiting that felt personal, like he already knew we were there, knew we were listening, and knew exactly what kind of storm he'd dropped into our laps. Callan stood with her back to the wall, gun raised, breathing shallow. I hadn't seen her this scared. Not in the alley. Not when we were shot at. Not even when we saw the fake version of me on video. Open it, I said quietly. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Are you serious? I nodded. If he wanted to kill us, we'd already be dead. They've had chances. This is different. Travis. He knows something. Something I need to hear. She hesitated, then slowly lowered the gun. I stepped to the door and, without thinking too hard, turned the lock and pulled it open. There he was. An older man, maybe late 50s, with a face like an unfinished sketch. Eyes too tired for his age. Lips that looked like they'd forgotten how to smile. But he didn't feel threatening. He felt broken, in a way that mirrored something in me. You're him, I said. The trainer. The one who taught the fake. He nodded. His name was Jonah. He wasn't just a copy of you. He was a runaway. A desperate kid. They gave him your face because he already wanted to disappear. You were a perfect vessel. Stable. Clean. Unassuming. Why are you here? Callan asked behind me, still holding the pistol. He looked at her. Because I defected. 3 months ago. I took something I shouldn't have. A memory vault. I've been on the run ever since. I saw your names in the system. Saw how close they were to finishing the loop. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. He didn't stop me. What's in the vault? I asked. Redemption, he said simply. The proof you didn't know existed. The video that shows Jonah being forced into the operation. The forged biometric signatures. The doctor's logs. You weren't just framed. You were stolen from. They didn't want you eliminated. They wanted to erase the line between you and Jonah so no one could ever trace the fraud. You were a story they wanted to overwrite. I felt something shift inside me. Not rage. Not fear. Something softer. Something closer to release. He held out a small data card. Take this. You'll need to go public. Controlled. Carefully. But you'll be safe with this. And her. I looked him in the eye. Why help us? He smiled. Not a fake smile. A sad, grateful one. Because Jonah was my son. I didn't know what to say, but I nodded. And he nodded back, turned, and walked away into the woods like a man with no more fight left to give. Callan stepped outside beside me. Is it real? She asked. I held up the data card. Feels like it. She exhaled slowly, and then, for the first time in what felt like years, smiled. Not wide, not carefree, but real. We left that cabin before dawn, drove north for 3 states, and met the contact she mentioned, an independent data journalist with an encrypted news stream and zero fear. In 2 weeks, the story broke wide open. Quietly, but loud enough for the right people. Internal whistleblowers came forward. The network collapsed from within. They didn't come after us again. Not once. We rented a house by another lake. A quieter one, with a porch that didn't creak and trees that didn't watch you. I got a dog. Named her Pixel. Callan laughed at that. We didn't talk about the past for a while. But one night, I finally asked her why she came back. She didn't say, because I loved you. She said, because I never stopped believing you were worth saving, even when you didn't believe it yourself. I'm not who I was before. That version of me, the one who ran, the one who doubted, the one who thought silence was safer than truth, he's gone now. Buried. Not erased. Just replaced. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to run anymore. I walked away without saying goodbye once. This time I stayed.